All right, so some background on Wingstop. What began as a small buffalo-style chicken wing restaurant in Garland, Texas, continues to soar to great heights. Today, there are more than 1,500 restaurants open across the globe. Oh, Wingstop quickly became a fan favorite when they first opened their doors in 1994. Their proprietary recipes, outstanding food, and superior customer service created a demand that could only be satisfied by more locations. And in 1997, they began offering franchises. Today, they are one of the fastest growing concepts in the country, attracting top entrepreneurs and operators with a drive and passion to own their own business. They have over 20 years of flavor. Since setting up shop in 1994, they've been putting flavors first and are not about to stop. They're all about taking their wings to another level, saucing and tossing the freshest flavors you crave along the way. Their mission to serve the world flavor. In 1997, they saw the opening of their first franchise Wingstop location, and by 2002, they had served over 1 billion wings to the world. It's flavor that defines them and has made Wingstop one of the fastest growing brands in the restaurant history.
So for our assumptions, we started off with our initial startup costs, which were primarily gathered from the Wingstop franchise page. Since the majority of Wingstop locations are franchise owned, they supply well-detailed information regarding the initial startup costs. On the website, they supplied a low estimate and a high estimate for initial costs. As a group, we decided to use the low cost as the base case, or as the best case, and the high cost as the worst case. And then we averaged them out to create our base case. The initial costs include items such as franchise fees, business operating permits, signs, opening inventory, and opening publicity and promotion, just to name a few. When summed together, the initial costs come out to $553,350 for the base case, $347,600 for the best case, and $759,100 for the worst case. For the fixed costs, there were three factors we considered: rent, insurance, and utilities. For rent, we decided to pull average rent based on high, medium, and low traffic cities with around 1,600 square feet, since the average Wingstop location is between 1,200 and 2,000 square feet. For insurance, we obtained a real quote from Insuron, which is a company that specializes in food business insurance coverage. And for utilities, we used a cost analysis that was created from other franchises and compared this information to the information found on the financial statements of the Wingstop website.
For our variable costs, we had cost of goods sold. For our best case, we had 34.1%. For best case, we had 33%. And for worst, we had 35.6%. For labor costs, for base, we had set 27.9%, 24.8% for best, and 33% for worst. For our advertising per revenue percentage, we had 5% across the board. For royalty percentage, we had 5% for base, 4% for best, and 6% for worst. Inflation rate, 5% for base, 4% for best, and 6% for worst. And then our benefits for revenue, we had $1,250,000 for base, $1,350,000 for best, and $1,150,000 for worst. For growth percentage and annual revenue, we had 5.70% for base, 6% for best, and 5.45% for worst. Our yearly profit, we had $180,000 for base, $220,000 for best, and $140,000 for worst. And then for WAC, we had 5% all across the board. And then our payback standard, we had 8 years.
All right, so starting off for our base case, assuming that we start today, the startup cost is going to be $553,000, like we talked in the assumptions. And for our first year in operations, considering that we probably won't be open for the full year, we take half of the revenues, which is $1.25 million, and we spread that out throughout the half of the year, with cost of goods sold being a fixed percentage of our revenues, which is 34.1%. Our employee costs being 27.9%. Our royalty, I believe, at 5%. Fixed cost, let's see. Do we have fixed cost as a percentage? No, right? Oh yeah, we just did it with inflation. So fixed cost for that first year is $116,000, and then advertising costs as well, another percentage of fixed revenue, which is another 5%. So moving on to our second year, so we took the 1.25 million and we multiplied it by the growth rate of at 5.7%. So throughout the next couple of years, we continue to grow at that steady rate of 5.7% until we hit our profit goal in the year 2029. So with net present value, we end up being at 37,641, which we ended up accepting. Our internal rate of return, 36.82%. Our discounted payback period at 6.19 years, which according to our assumptions, our payback standard is going to be anything under 8 years. So we accepted that. That's it, right?
Okay, moving on to the best case. I feel like to start off, I just want to clarify like the different differentiations between the best, worst, and base case. A big thing is our cost of goods sold. There's about like around a 1% change, a decline for the best case. But a big thing as well is about, I would say, a 3% change in our labor cost, a decrease, 3% decrease. Of like percentage of our revenue, and you can see the same principle is added as the first year is technically a half year, so revenues also were in half, which corresponded to the employee cost also being half. And then as you move on, it's full revenue. As they mentioned before in the assumptions, revenue is about a 100,000 increase from the base case. And you can see overall the costs are, I would say, significantly lower. Even the initial setup, that was about like a 200,000 decrease. Altogether, it makes it seem very successful. You can see all the way to the right, profit ratio is very, very high. Our estimated profit, or the average you found online, was about, let's say, 220, like they said. And you can see it hit about 300,500. It shows that it's very successful. You can see at the bottom, our net present value equated to about 341,000. Our IRR, or internal rate of return, equaled about 70%, which is about double what our cost of goods sold was for the best case. And our discounted payback reached a bit less than 2.5 years. It's very, very successful.
And then looking at our worst case, looking at our revenues being cut down lower, and then our cost of goods sold also going up from our base case from 34.1% to a 35.6%, which we also found a high and a low range off of the Wingstop website. With that being said, also our employee costs, our royalty stayed the same, I believe. Oh no, our royalty did go up to 6% since Wingstop did give us a range from 4 to 6. So our worst case scenario, we're paying a little bit more on royalty, fixed cost, a little bit more just to pay the utilities of the building. But with that being said, with lower revenue and higher expenses, we never really end up making a profit. It really, throughout time forecasting, I think we forecasted how long? 24 years into the future, we really couldn't recoup our initial investment. And our net present value down there after 2046 is going to be negative 500,000. Internal rate of return is going to be 15.36%, a lot lower than our cost of goods sold, which is 35.6. And our discount payback, we could drag it on, but it's really just going to be infinite. So at this point, we didn't really want to, if we were to do a franchise, we wouldn't stay open exactly for 20 years to find out that we aren't making a profit. We would probably have a cutoff period well before then and see that it's not profitable.
And for our break even, the main thing was see, in order to get zero net present value, what percentage of revenue was optimal. And it was conducted through a what if analysis, just get the data table. And you can see the cutoff is, you can call it that, is about 60% revenue, which gives us 40% wiggle room. So you have 40% of revenue to lose technically and remain profitable based on the base case. But you can see our internal rate was about 5%. The main focus of the break even was just to see how much percentage of revenue. So you could, other data within the table isn't as relevant or as accurate as the other cases, which explains why you can see a bit like if you go out to 7 years, which is what we did for the base case, it was still negative in terms of the NPV, cumulative NPV. But the main part of this is the analysis to show that 60% is optimal revenue. And moving on to intangibles, obviously there's a lot of different intangibles that go into a franchise, let alone food industry. These are just a few you can list. The main issue with these are that you can't really quantify it, or it is quantifiable, but not through its effect, if that makes sense. So, for example, opening any type of business provides jobs for the local community. But a big thing about Wingstop is they actually don't provide any benefits. It's purely an hourly rate, which you can, but when you search online, you can see a lot of frustration towards work themselves saying that, but it's a means to an end, essentially. Another big thing is you can't consider the food as junk food. It is like a fast food chain. So the food is relatively unhealthy. It won't equate to a healthy like daily calorie intake and such. But at the opposite of that is you are feeding the community around you. You're opening another business, another form or cuisine of food, which you can't really quantify that. I feel like the biggest thing is the time of the business owner. Obviously, you can equate that, but the biggest thing is how much is too much. I feel like that's very subjective in terms of the owner themselves, how much time they can allocate. If they want to hire a GM to handle more of the day to day, and they're just quote unquote the owner. Another big thing is the majority of the business is from carry out, so that can either be done for good as you decrease your square footage of the physical restaurant. It's not like your traditional bricks and mortar store. It highly relies on applications like DoorDash, delivery. I'm pretty sure, in fact, they partner with DoorDash to take care of their delivery. Another big thing is that there's no focus on advertising to retain customers. I feel like that's mainly due to the fact that Wingstop has reached to a level where it is known. They're not trying to like return their customers. It's more so just expanding in terms of adding more franchises. And another thing I saw was that there was a complaint about since it's lower hiring, there's a lack of diversification, which can lead to I would say difficulty within the workspace and such. And as I said, there is a low benefit, which also equates to high employee turnover. And another big part of that is the workload per employee. When there's a lot of traffic, like I said, they're focused on online, so they have a lot of employees. So there's a high workload at times or peak times of the restaurant. There's many more I can list, like on the list. I can explain them more if you'd like in detail, but for the sake of the presentation, you can go to summary and if you have any questions.
Okay, so to summarize, our base case had a net present value of 37,641 with an internal rate of return of 36.82% and a discounted payback of 6.19 years. Our best case had NPV of 341,188 and an IRR of 69.87% and a discounted payback of 2.345 years. And then our worst case had a negative NPV of 503,893 and an internal rate of return of 15.36% and a discounted payback set to the 24 years, but really infinitely. So keeping in mind the break even, we conclude that it is feasible and beneficial to open a Wingstop franchise as long as the revenues are at 60%, because this would give us 40% wiggle room for unexpected expenses, which would make it a lower risk to take. And that concludes our presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, I agree with everything. It was good, made sense, covered everything. One issue I have that we need to address is the worst case. There's something going on with the worst case. So can you click on your worst case? We got to figure out what's going on there, because your worst case is better than your break even, and yet your worst case is negative. So go over to C31. Let's see if we can figure out what happened there. So what is assumption D25? Go to assumptions D25. Yeah. So you got one typo. That's okay. We talked about that. So y'all see what the typo is? Where is your cost of capital? Line 35. Go back to your worst case. Y'all see how WACC is on line 35? And go back up to 31. So that has your WAC and 25. So that first one shouldn't be D25. It should be what? D35. So it's going to be positive. And same thing over in column J. In J6. That one needs to be 35 as well. Y'all can see how it's, you know, kind of, that's one thing when you step back, it's hard when you're in the middle of the process. You can just copy it down if you want to. Yeah, just copy that one down. 113.02. All right, so does that make more sense there? Now it makes sense because I mean, it's still not very good, so you can still reject it, but you have a really good present value, but your present value doesn't turn positive until 9 years. So if you did your net present value through, say, 8 years, it would have still been negative. And so not a big deal, but just to point out, you know, that's the kind of thing on something like this. I always like to just step back and say, does the summary table make sense? You got an IR that's positive. You got a scenario that's better than your break even, and yet it's negative. So just something to watch out. I think the base case looks correct. I mean, you can look at the base case real quick and just make sure it says 35. No, it says 25 as well. I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, okay, so yeah, all right, so you got that issue throughout. So that's, your project's actually a whole lot better than you have it here. You could say it's not wrong, you just have a really, really high cost of capital, but that would be a really high cost of capital, right? So, all right. Other than that, my biggest issue is, and I probably should have cut that line 25. Sorry, I can't remember what feedback I gave y'all on that. But just your confidence on the revenue. Did you get the revenues from Wingstop? Did they give you a very wide range? Go back to your assumptions, because your range isn't that wide, I don't think. You go 1.2. So you got about $100,000 spread. I guess the confidence you have is your break even. Go to your break even and make sure it's got line 25. I mean 35. So that one was correct, right? No, that one says, okay, yeah, that one. Yeah, copy that down. All right, so that makes sense, just be 7. So I think the break even is the real key. That's 60%. I think you said it well, Daisy. It gives you, or I think it was Daisy. That gives you quite a bit of room to be wrong, about 40%. You said 40% on expenses. That's a good way to put it. It could be 40% on the revenue or 40% on the expense, you know, or some combination. So it sounds like you got a lot of room. I mean, what's the chance you'd only have $800,000 in revenue? That sounds pretty remote, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So now, so you walk through the intangibles. You're making this a recommendation. So my bottom line question is, if your great aunt walked up to you with 400,000 and said, "I want you to start a Wingstop when you graduate from college and make this your full time," would you do it? Would this be a worthwhile, valuable thing for you to do?
You said they would cover initial costs, or like just in general?
Well, she'll make the investment, but she's the maybe she's going to make you joint owner. So maybe you're going to have to pay her back with the profits or something. So I don't know. Obviously, she just gives you the money, but
I mean,
your partner is in this. You're going to put 50 in, and she's going to put the rest or something. And I'll share it. But I mean, does this sound like I mean, you're all talented, smart people. Does this sound like a good lifestyle to be managing something like this?
I look at it from like a holistic view. That the big thing about franchises, I feel like, is once you reach a certain stage, like you open the first one and it's successful, the key is opening more. But also, I feel like the big thing is you have to have it in like a high traffic area, more or less, or like a city, not like a remote city. So I would definitely take the opportunity. I've seen a lot of examples people really invest in that. I mean, like you saw in the deduction, it's growing to be like one of the best franchises in the restaurant industry. I think they have about like 1,500 franchises open, which is a lot. So it shows you that it's successful. It's just a matter of like pick like picking the correct variables. If that makes sense. But I would invest in long
Well, how
Yeah,
many wing
and
stops are in San Antonio? Has what, about 3 or 4 of them?
I think they have more than
Uh,
that. I think they
I,
have a
I
couple.
yeah.
There's a couple on Bandera Road. That's interesting.
There's on Days of
One
Olive
on
too.
35, on 10. I mean, yeah, they've got a pretty good coverage of the city, but they are pretty well spread out. But South San Antonio has nothing. Is there, I'm wondering, maybe South, it's just not, Wingstop's just not popular there, hasn't got that, but they definitely have some room to move in South San Antonio. I forget what majors y'all are. I mean, it's a very different business. If you're a management major, I could see a management major doing a franchise right out of school if they could somehow get the funding. And this would be kind of a good challenge, wouldn't it, for a management major? You're hiring entry-level people, you got a manager, if you have multiple sites, I don't know, Nasser, when you say more sites, how many you think you can handle? Could one person handle 3 of these sites, 4 of these sites?
Well, big thing we found was when we called them, they actually have a GM, an assistant GM, and then a floor GM, like an hourly GM. So there's a lot of they take wait, well they
different
don't,
levels.
but you hire a lot of people that take care of the day-to-day operations. But like from an owner perspective, I feel like you can have a lot. Oh, you can
So
see the last.
the GM could actually be responsible for more than one store.
I'm not quite sure about the. I think
I
it's. Okay, go ahead, please.
I think that they have like almost kind of like an operator at the very top, that like the people that they invest in, and they like hire all the general managers, and those are the different people that go out and buy more stores. Kind of like in one of our intangibles at the last one, Rick Ross owns around like 35 franchises. And not necessarily saying that he's in that Wingstop, managing everybody, but I believe that he started off of like just a couple stores, investing it, and then kind of building up his team from there. Like he would get like a good general manager, a good AGM, and then those general managers would go ahead and train like the other staff, and that's how you kind of like build your own team. So at the end of the day, your AGM or your general managers come back and they report to you about like all their profits and revenues, and I guess you could kind of just make the decision from there if you want to cut more employees or cut more costs or whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I wonder, Super Bowl day, if they even have enough workers, that's probably just an absolute, it's like Mother's Day for a florist.
I feel like
You
that's when
almost can't.
they're at full capacity at that point.
Yeah,
And
you
then
almost
just
Yeah,
can't.
and I'm not too sure. I might be wrong on this, but I went to Wingstop during actually Super Bowl, and they actually closed in like their whole dining and was just like carry out only. So most of the business is carry out anyways, but it would also eliminate the people to clean and take care of like the restaurant itself, and just focus on like one thing, and that's just carry out too.
Yeah, and I'm not sure with restaurants if they can actually even show the Super Bowl. That's probably illegal, unless they pay some huge fee to the NFL. So they probably
Yeah,
can't even show it on their TVs without some kind of contract. So they might as well shut, because no one's going to go in there and eat chicken wings with nothing on the screen. Yeah, I've thought about franchises. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say I wouldn't be sure if this would be an intangible. I don't think we added it, but I've also read somewhere that they're playing with the idea of becoming also like a drive-through as well as carry out. That could also be an intangible. There's no data because no Wingstop has really tried it just yet. Because I think every time I've gone to a Wingstop, they take not like a long time, but I'm pretty sure all their products are pretty fresh. So adding in a drive-through may be beneficial if they're able to get everything out fast enough, but it could also be like a bad thing if they end up getting backed up. we kind of just slow down the business. But that could also be another intangible that we could add.
Yeah, that could open up more. They're kind of on high. They obviously seek out major highways. All right, interesting. Yeah, I've thought about franchises. I guess the other question, the last question I have for you, I don't know if Braden has a question. The last question is, you talked about having 3 wing stops. And it sounds like this guy, Rick, that's what he does is wing stops. If someone comes to you with 1.5 million and says, open 3 franchises, what would be your idea between 3 wing stops versus a wing stop, a Smoothie King, and a Baskin Robbins? Is there just too much learning by value of doing just one shop and sticking with it?
Personally, I feel like when you stick with one, like the more you open, the more experience you have. It's better that way, in a sense. And also, I think I found out about Wingstop is they really focus on making sure you get started up like successfully. They have one of the intangibles actually is like they require training for franchise owners, like a 3-week orientation. And after that, for 2 straight weeks, they bring in experts with you to make sure that everything opens up smoothly. So I feel like their customer service to franchise owners is pretty good. I feel like I would stick with one, and that being like Wingstop, and maybe focusing more on it being like takeout rather than dine-in, just to save costs.
Yeah, it'd be cool to have one last class. I mean, y'all wouldn't want to have one last class, but we're having several students doing franchise this semester. If I were to ever do a franchise, I think I would do exactly what y'all are doing, set up the Excel. I think I would look at, 40 different franchises. I mean, your point is extremely important, Nasser. How supportive is the franchise office? That's a big decision. Wingstop sounds interesting. Smoothie King sounds interesting. They all sound interesting.
Also, a thing is too of Wingstop that I found pretty interesting is that their royalty percentages of revenue is actually like one of the best ones in the in the market. So comparing it to like other places, I believe McDonald's might be 10% or something like that. I know other franchises they have higher royalty costs. So at the end of the day, that's more money in your pocket. So I think Wingstop's actually like generally a really good franchise to start up, especially if you're able to lock down like a really good location and have like a pretty solid team to assist you in your everyday operations.
Yeah, so think in this project how you would, let's say you had 10 franchises. You have the net present value, but they're different costs, so you have to adjust for that. That's for that profitability index we talked about. You also have the intangibles, and so that you talk about the royalties lower, but then after you mentioned in your intangibles that they may not be as good a marketers as McDonald's. McDonald's is obviously a behemoth marketer, so it gives you a lot of play, especially around certain promotions. I think it'd be a pretty tough decision if you had 20 franchises to select from. You're probably sold on Wingstop because that's your project. Are you convinced it's the absolute best one, or how long would you take you become convinced what's the best one? I mean, it's a really, really important decision.
Like it's like what you said, you have to compare as many as you can, or the ones you're interested in at least. You take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely wouldn't do a Subway just because the Subway, net profit's only about 60,000. That's a lot of work for 60,000. You're at least up in the 150 to 200 range. It's a bigger store, more work, but at least you're getting more bang. So it's interesting. I don't know how many of y'all will actually do a franchise. Probably not many of you, maybe not until your 30s or 40s if you want to step out. It is a pretty fast way to become an entrepreneur, have your own business, run your own, it has definitely some interest to it. So, all right, good. Braden, do you have any questions?
No, sir. I think they did great.
All right, good. So fix your Excel spreadsheet and send it to me, and I won't count off as much as I would have. You can revise it and send it to me. So, and I probably should have caught that when you sent me the base case anyway, so it could be partly my fault. But y'all see, Excel is always dangerous. Always step back and just ask, are these things consistent with each other? So, all right, good job, team. Appreciate it. See y'all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.